OTF Jam revealed the names of the rappers Lil Durk wanted dead, and the testimony he delivered inside that Los Angeles federal courthouse is unlike anything this trial has produced so far. The person who knew Durk longest, who stood by him through prison sentences and the entire journey of building OTF, walked into that courtroom and described a murder campaign targeting multiple people connected to the death of King Von. He admitted to 3 murders of his own. He admitted to more than 100 armed robberies. He described participating in the Los Angeles attack that killed Quando Rondo's cousin. And then he walked the jury through the list of people he says Durk wanted gone. What he said on that stand is going to follow this trial all the way to the verdict. Stay with us, because the names behind the headline are the most explosive part of a testimony that has already changed everything about this case. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down OTF Jam's explosive courtroom testimony about the rappers Lil Durk, allegedly wanted killed, his own criminal history including murders starting at age 17, how he was allegedly sent to Los Angeles to carry out a hit, and what this means for the federal murder for hire case. Let's get into it. Before we get into the alleged target list, let us establish why OTF Jam's testimony carries so much weight in this courtroom. Casey Hester grew up alongside Lil Durk on Chicago's South Side. Their connection predates fame, music, money, and only the family as a recognizable name in hip-hop. Both men were connected to the Black Disciples environment from a young age, and Jam eventually became a shooter within that structure. He knows the world Durk came from not as an observer, but as someone who lived inside it for decades. That proximity is exactly what makes him valuable to federal prosecutors, and exactly what makes him a high-stakes target for Brian Steele. Prosecutors are not relying on Jam because he stumbled onto some evidence accidentally. They are relying on him because he allegedly sat in rooms where important conversations happened, because he allegedly traveled to California, participated in the events at the center of this case, and knew the inner workings of OTF in a way that no investigator or surveillance camera could match. He is not someone who heard something secondhand. He is someone who was allegedly there, and Jam himself confirmed in open court that he was one of the masked gunmen present during the August 2022 attack, making him not just a witness to the alleged conspiracy, but a participant who has already pleaded guilty to his role in it. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his defense team has been attacking Jam's credibility from every available angle. The alleged bounty and target list emerges from Jam's testimony about an OTF meeting that he says took place following King Von's death in Atlanta in November 2020. According to what Jam told the jury, Durk addressed the people in that room and made clear that if anyone called Quando Rondo or Lou Tim, they would be financially taken care of. Jam testified that someone in the room asked whether the amount was half a ticket, meaning $500,000, or $1 million. And according to Jam, Durk's response was that if people catch Quando or Tim, they were going to be straight. They did not have to worry about nothing. Jam also testified that Durk told him directly to get rid of Rondo. Those are 2 separate and significant pieces of testimony. The bounty comment establishes a financial incentive offered to the group as a whole. The get rid of Rondo comment, if believed, establishes that Durk gave Jam a personal directive in a private conversation. Prosecutors want the jury to read both pieces together as evidence of a deliberate murder for hire conspiracy with Durk at its center. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty. His defense team argues that Jam's account was shaped by his own legal exposure and his desire for a more favorable outcome at sentencing, not by a commitment to complete accuracy. Now let us talk about the names. The title of this video says 5 rappers. The reality of what the testimony describes is more complicated than a clean numbered list. And it is important to understand that difference before any of these names start circulating unchecked. The government's theory involves 6 individuals in the broader bounty narrative. Not all of those individuals have been publicly confirmed in the court reporting available at the time of this video, and not all of them are rappers in the traditional sense. What we can confirm from court reporting and verified testimony is who the explicitly named alleged targets were, who died during the attack, and where the remaining names exist in the government's theory. We are going to walk through each of these carefully rather than sensationalizing a list of names that carries real legal and reputational weight for the people attached to them. The second alleged target was Lou Tim, whose real name is Timothy Leaks. He was involved in the confrontation outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta in November 2020 that resulted in King Von's death. Lou Tim was initially charged in Georgia with felony murder in connection with Von's death, but those charges were eventually dropped after prosecutors determined the evidence supported a self-defense interpretation under Georgia state law. Ryan Steele has used that Georgia ruling as part of his broader challenge to the prosecution's motive narrative, arguing that if the government's own investigation concluded Lou Tim acted in self-defense, the foundation of the alleged revenge campaign is legally complicated. The federal case, however, is not about what Georgia courts determined. It is about whether Durk allegedly organized a response to Von's death, regardless of those legal conclusions. Prosecutors allege that whatever the law said, Durk viewed Lou Tim as someone who needed to be held accountable, and that belief drove the alleged retaliation campaign alongside the targeting of Quando Rondo. The third person connected to the alleged operation is Xavier Robinson Lou Pobb. Unlike Quando Rondo and Lou Tim, who were allegedly targeted, Lou Pobb was not someone prosecutors name as an intended victim of the August 2022 attack. He was Quando Rondo's cousin. He was 24 years old. He was in the vehicle when the attack happened, and he died from 4 gunshot wounds, including one that pierced his heart, in an attack that prosecutors say was aimed at someone else entirely.
Tonight, in a deadly shooting near the Beverly Center, we've learned the victim is a friend of rapper Quando Rondo. The Atlanta-based performer shared this picture on Instagram today. According to the LAPD, the victim was ambushed by 3 men while getting gas on Friday. Video from the scene appears to show Quando Rondo distraught while first responders moved the body.
His death is why this case carries federal murder for hire charges rather than simply conspiracy allegations. An actual homicide occurred. A young man who was not the intended target lost his life. The government is not alleging that Lou Pobb was placed on any bounty list. They are alleging that the decision to organize an operation against Quando Rondo created the conditions under which Lou Pobb lost his life, and that whoever is responsible for directing that operation bears criminal responsibility for the outcome, regardless of who the intended target was. Then there is the broader group of alleged targets beyond Quando Rondo and Lou Tim. Federal prosecutors describe the alleged retaliation campaign as extending to additional people connected to the Savannah, Georgia Circle, and the rival camps surrounding Quando Rondo. The government's theory involves 6 individuals in the broader target narrative. Not all of those individuals have been publicly identified in the court reporting available at the time of this video. The title says 5 rappers, which reflects how social media condensed the testimony into a shareable headline. The accurate framing is that Quando Rondo and Lou Tim are the explicitly named alleged primary targets. Lou Pobb died during the attack, and additional alleged targets connected to the rival camp remain unnamed in the public record. We are not going to guess at names that have not been established in credible court reporting. What we can say is that the government's theory of a broader retaliation campaign, not just a single shooting, but an organized effort targeting multiple people, is one of the key elements prosecutors need to establish to make the murder for hire conspiracy charge hold together. Then came the Tory Lanez situation, and this is one of the most discussed moments of Jam's entire testimony. Jam testified that he was around Lil Durk in Miami in 2022 when their group encountered Tory Lanez and people in his circle. According to Jam, he saw artists in Tory Lanez' circle wearing expensive jewelry, and told Durk directly, "I am about to start robbing folks because these folks got chains and I do not have chains." That was Jam's exact framing of the conversation, delivered under oath in federal court. According to Jam, Durk's response was enthusiastic. Durk allegedly said that is the Jam he had been waiting on, expressing approval for the aggressive mindset. After Jam's testimony became public, social media quickly connected this moment to a rapper named V.S. Ken, who has been publicly associated with Tory Lanez. V.S. Ken himself came out and publicly denied being the specific person Jam had in mind. That denial matters. VVS Ken is not a confirmed intended victim. His name entered the conversation through online speculation, not through Jam identifying him by name in court. Until a specific name is established in a verifiable courtroom setting, that name does not belong in the same sentence as a confirmed alleged target. What the Tory Lanez testimony actually established is a pattern prosecutors are using to build a broader portrait of Jam's role and mindset within OTF. He described being someone whose instinct was to rob, to pursue chains, to exercise violence as a means of expressing status and loyalty. And he described Durk allegedly responding positively to that instinct. This matters because the defense has pointed out that Durk eventually tried to rein James in, allegedly telling him during a bathroom confrontation at a music video shoot to stop involving himself in murders because he was drawing too much federal attention to everyone around him. Those two moments, one of Durk allegedly celebrating the aggression and one of him allegedly warning Jam to stop, are both in front of the jury. Together, they create a complicated picture of a relationship in which violence was sometimes welcomed and sometimes seen as a liability. Prosecutors will emphasize the first moment. The defense will emphasize the second. The jury has to figure out what both of them mean together. Now, let us go deeper into Jam's criminal history, because the things he admitted to on that witness stand are extraordinary, and they shape how the jury should evaluate everything he says. Jam testified that his first experience with the real firearm came at age 12, when a gun was placed in his hands and he was instructed to fire at a passing car in retaliation for a paintball gun incident in his neighborhood. He was 12 years old and he pulled the trigger. He described becoming a shooter within the Black Disciple structure after that, and testified about being involved in approximately 10 to 15 separate shootings between the ages of 10 and 18. He admitted to committing more than 100 armed robberies, targeting primarily drug dealers and people he believed had money. He described using proceeds from those crimes to help support his family because his parents struggled with severe drug addiction and the household often did not have enough food. He said he committed his first robbery at around age 12 for that reason. The defense challenged the sympathetic backstory, arguing parts of it were fabricated for the jury. Prosecutors argue his willingness to describe his own crimes honestly demonstrates credibility. Both interpretations are for the jury to weigh. Then, Jam described a 2010 armed robbery in Racine, Wisconsin. He was 17 years old. He testified that he and an older gang member traveled with the intent to rob a store owner believed to owe money to a family member. During the robbery, a struggle broke out. The older man told Jam to shoot. Jam fired. When the other man backed away because the victim recognized him, Jam said he put the gun to the victim's head and pulled the trigger. That murder caught up with him. The conviction resulted in a 12-year prison sentence that Jam served in full. He was released in 2022, the same year as the Los Angeles attack. That timeline matters. The man who was one of the masked gunmen in the August 2022 attack on Quando Rondo had been out of prison for only a matter of months when the alleged operation took place. He went from a 12-year sentence directly back into OTF circle and directly into the events that put him in that federal courtroom. Prosecutors can argue that his reintegration into Durk's circle happened quickly and intentionally. The defense can argue that a man freshly released from prison has every reason to do whatever is asked of him by the people holding his financial future in their hands. Now let us talk about the alleged California operation, because this is where the testimony takes the retaliation theory from a conversation in Chicago to a gas station in West Hollywood. According to Jam's testimony, flights out of Chicago and rental vehicles were coordinated and paid for using a credit card tied to the OTF label. Members of the group flew to California. Jam testified that he and another OTF affiliate named Asa Houston flew to San Diego and drove to a Hooters restaurant to wait for other members of the group, specifically DeAndre Wilson D-Day. On a FaceTime call with OTF affiliate Duty Low, identified by prosecutors as co-conspirator 4, Jam received information about Quando Rondo's location. According to Jam, Duty Low obtained that information from someone connected to Rondo, who was supposed to deliver marijuana. The group also picked up rental vehicles from an exotic car lot as part of the logistics. They met with Kayvon Grant, OTF Vonnie, who handed out 3 firearms to the group. Jam testified that he received a Beretta because people in the group knew he was willing to use one. The alleged plan was to use the marijuana delivery as a pretext to get Rondo outside his hotel and attack him when he came downstairs. On August 18, 2022, the group positioned themselves near Quando Rondo's hotel location and waited. Jam testified that they decided not to act that night because heavy police activity in the area made it too risky. They called off the operation and returned to their hotel. The next day, August 19, 2022, the operation resumed. The group traveled in a black Sprinter van and stopped at a Walmart where they purchased black hoodies and gloves before heading toward their target. They tracked Quando Rondo to a gas station in West Hollywood near the Beverly Center. 18 rounds were fired into his vehicle. Quando Rondo survived. His 24-year-old cousin Lou Pav was fatally shot, struck by 4 gunshot wounds, including one that pierced his heart. When prosecutors asked Jam in open court whether he participated in the killing of Xavier Robinson, Jam confirmed it. He identified himself as one of the masked gunmen who fired into Quando Rondo's vehicle that day. He did not describe the attack as something he witnessed from a distance. He accepted his own participation under oath in front of the jury, making himself simultaneously one of the prosecution's most powerful witnesses and one of the most credibly impeachable by the defense. Because a man who admits to murder on the stand has nothing left to protect except the version of events he is telling about someone else. Prosecutors also introduced an Instagram post written by King Von himself that was shown to the jury during the trial. The post stated that if Smirk want a dude dead, that dude dead. Smirk is a well-known nickname for Durk. Prosecutors want the jury to read that post alongside everything Jam testified about and see it as evidence of how Durk's alleged intentions were understood and communicated by the people closest to him inside OTF. The post is not a confession. It is a social media statement that prosecutors are presenting as context for understanding how Durk's alleged directives function within the circle. The defense can argue that a social media post is not a legal admission, that rappers communicate through exaggerated language regularly, and that interpreting it as evidence of murder for hire requires the jury to make assumptions the evidence does not independently support. Judge Fitzgerald allowed rap lyrics and digital communications into the trial as evidence over defense objections, and this post is part of that body of material. Now let us talk about the 6ix9ine detail, because it adds an unusual dimension to the alleged motive that goes beyond grief and into public reputation and social pressure. Jam testified that Durk was frustrated by 6ix9ine trolling him publicly about the song Slide for Von, and about the fact that nobody had done anything about Quando Rondo or Lou Tim in the time since King Von's death. That testimony suggests the alleged bounty was not born purely from private grief. It was also shaped by the kind of public scrutiny that exists when your closest friend is killed and the entire hip-hop world is watching to see how you respond. The idea that a rival antagonist was using social media to mock the absence of retaliation added external pressure onto what was already a deeply personal loss. Prosecutors want the jury to understand that the combination of grief, loyalty, and public pressure is what allegedly drove the decision to organize and finance a retaliation campaign. The defense will argue that grief and frustration are not evidence of a criminal conspiracy, and that interpreting a rapper's emotional response to losing his closest friend as proof of murder for hire intent is exactly the kind of overreach Steele has been pushing back against throughout this trial. Now let us examine the defense strategy against all of this testimony, because Jam's account is not simply accepted at face value by the other side of that courtroom. Brian Steele, representing Lil Durk, has been attacking Jam's credibility since before Jam took the witness stand. Steele exposed during cross-examination of Detective Carias that federal investigators met with Jam approximately 30 times, but only 3 of those interviews were audio recorded. He argued to the jury that roughly 90% of those conversations happened without any documentation the defense could scrutinize, and that this was a deliberate choice by the government to shape Jam's narrative in unrecorded sessions. He called Jam a violent coward and a dangerous individual directly in court, characterizing him as a manipulative career criminal, leveraging his access to Durk to buy his own freedom. He challenged the sympathetic childhood backstory with evidence he argued showed parts of it were fabricated to generate jury sympathy. He exposed that during the critical FaceTime call on the van ride to Los Angeles, it was Didi who gave the verbal instruction to go crazy, not Durk. Durk allegedly said nothing and instead made a hand gesture. Steele used that acknowledgement to argue that Jam had exaggerated Durk's direct verbal involvement in the operation at the moment it was happening in real time, which is exactly the kind of distinction that can matter when a jury is deciding whether someone directed a murder for hire conspiracy. Steele also introduced evidence that Jam had expressed resentment and jealousy toward Durk, despite testifying on the stand that he still had love for Durk because of the financial support Durk had provided over the years. Jam's account of that financial support was detailed. He described Durk putting money on his commissary consistently through 12 years of incarceration, a period during which many people he knew stopped communicating entirely. When Jam was released, he testified that Durk's associates helped provide clothing and included him on trips to Detroit and Miami. Steele used records and messages, he argued, showed that beneath that loyalty sat deep personal bitterness and jealousy about the gap between where Durk had ended up and where Jam had ended up. The suggestion was that Jam was not cooperating because he finally decided to be honest about what he knew. He was cooperating because he was settling a personal score while simultaneously trying to reduce a mandatory life sentence. Prosecutors respond that a personal history with the defendant is exactly what gives an insider witness credibility rather than undermining it. The jury will have to decide which version of Jam's motivation they believe, and that decision may be the most important one they make. The broader meaning of all of this testimony extends beyond the individual names and the individual alleged targets. King Von died in November 2020. His death, according to prosecutors, set in motion a chain of events that ended with Lil Pav dead in West Hollywood, multiple people facing federal charges, and one of the most closely watched hip-hop trials in recent memory. The government's theory is not simply that Durk wanted revenge. Their theory is that he organized, financed, and directed that revenge in a way that makes him criminally responsible for everything that followed, including the death of a person who was not even the intended target. The prosecution is trying to connect the alleged bounty meeting, the OTF label credit card used for travel, the exotic car lot rentals, the Walmart purchase of disguised clothing, the 3 firearms handed out by Kayvon Grant, and the 18 rounds fired in West Hollywood into one coherent murder-for-hire conspiracy with Durk at its center. The defense is trying to break that structure apart at every point, arguing that Kayvon Grant and others carried out the operation with their own personal motivations and without Durk personally directing them from start to finish. That is the fundamental legal disagreement this jury will ultimately have to resolve when they deliberate. That is the central contradiction of Jam's testimony and of this trial. His proximity to Durk gives the prosecution their insider. His criminal history and plea deal give the defense their attack. His childhood relationship with Durk makes his testimony potentially powerful. His incentive to reduce an otherwise devastating sentence makes his credibility permanently vulnerable. He admitted to first handling a firearm at 12. He admitted to killing someone at 17 and serving 12 years for it. He admitted to more than 100 armed robberies. He admitted to being one of the masked gunmen in the West Hollywood attack. And then he sat in that chair and identified Lil Durk as the person who allegedly directed and financed all of it. Whether the jury believes the insider version of Jam or the self-interested cooperator version is the question that may ultimately determine what happens to Lil Durk. What is clear regardless of outcome is that OTF Jam's testimony has placed the inner workings of OTF under a level of courtroom scrutiny that cannot be undone. Drop a comment and let us know what you think about who the jury will believe and where this trial is heading. And tap in on the video on screen for everything else we have been covering.